Hi, Hamish Conway here, and welcome to TACOS Tuesday. And this is the Gold Coast edition. Seb and I are here for a conference, but we've still got to get this podcast done. So we're going to do it in person today. And we're going to be covering the topic of wasted spend. Now, we have touched on this in other episodes, but we're just going to focus on this today. Might not be as long as some of the others, but we're going to look at how it comes about and how to fix it. And we'll give some interesting context on that as well. So let's get stuck in. Okay, well, it's actually quite hot out there. Nice to be inside where it's a bit cooler. I know, just long pants is a bit much. But anyway, Seb, welcome to TACOS Tuesday, episode, I think we're 31 now.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we've gone past the point of no return now. So it's like we just got to keep on keeping on.
I know, even when we're in, I'd rather be down at the beach. But anyway, here we are. So as I said earlier, we're going to be touching on here today about wasted spend. No one likes having wasted spend in terms of seeing their hard-earned money or hard-earned budget go to waste. So we're going to cover off today, how can people figure out you're never going to eliminate it, but it's how to seriously reduce that and just drive that efficiency in your advertising. So look, can you give us some context here in terms of why we're kind of qualified to cover off on this?
Yeah. So there's a few things here with wasted spend. So the first is we'll define what it is. So we define wasted spend anything that you get a click without an order. And so as Hamish said, you're never going to get rid of it because there are times when you're trying to grow your business and you're wanting to do research, and that's going to involve you getting more clicks to uncover search terms and opportunities for you to sort of dive into. But we get the unique opportunity to audit a lot of accounts. And so over the years, we kind of know what good benchmarks look like. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then around the context part that Hamish mentioned is depending on where the brand is at, will determine what is more acceptable. So benchmarks for newer brands are going to be higher. Like you're willing to have a higher level of wasted spend compared to brands that are more established.
And that's where in some of the previous episodes we would dive into the detail of the different ad types and when you might use those, for example. So, okay, let's cover off how does wasted spend occur?
So the primary way that wasted spend happens is that brands spend too much of their budget on research-based campaigns. Now, we've talked about this in previous episodes where we've talked about match types. So there's different match types within Amazon. You've got exact match, you've got phrase match, you've got broad match, and you've got auto campaigns. Majority of the wasted spend comes from what we call auto campaigns, and that's because auto campaigns are very research-based. They'll show up top of search, they'll show up on rest of search, they'll show up on product pages of competitors, and sometimes they'll show up on not as relevant products like substitute products or complementary products and things like that. So they're very, very liberal in the way that they advertise. And to give you kind of an idea, some of the amounts of wasted spend we've seen on those campaigns can be upwards of 50%. So 50% of the spend you spend on those types of campaigns are going to be, can be waste. Now, there's two ways to fix for that. First is that limit the amount of budget you spend on those campaigns, knowing that they're going to have higher waste. The second is that, and we've touched on this on the previous episode, is that you want to go through and clean up your campaign. So do negative matching. Get rid of things that are just not ever going to convert for you. For example, if you sell glasses and they're not prescription, it's like don't show up on prescription glasses because you're never going to convert on something like that. And so that, that's kind of an example. So you could negative phrase the term prescription, for example, in that example to get rid of it. The next ad type that creates waste is our phrase and our broad. They're both research-based match types as well. Those ones are more like the 30% or lower wasted spend, or can be. Again, it does depend on if your account's more mature, you could be at 15% on those research and phrase-based ones. But again, same principles as the auto. You want to be doing your negative matching. You want to make sure that you are limiting your budget to those, depending on what stage of growth you're at for a product. And then finally, to give you an idea of the last match type, which is the one that we love the most, exact match. We use phrase, broad, and auto to go find search terms, and then we harvest all of those to get them into our exact match. And the reason for that is that most of the time we see this under 2% in wasted spend. So it's super, super low. And it's because you can get your bids exactly to the right price that you're willing to pay for whatever it is your objectives are. Yeah.
Okay, so there's match types are a factor. What other factors are there in terms of campaign structure or the, i.e. wrong grouping of SKUs? Can that lead to waste, or what are some other factors out of campaign structure that can lead to waste?
Yeah, so some other things can be advertising on products that have poor reviews, long delivery times, basically anything that makes the customer think twice about purchasing your product, unoptimized listings, so like your image stack is not great. Maybe there's specific things people need to know about your product and you're not talking about it in your second image, your third image, etc. So all of those things are going to improve or reduce the amount of waste that you have.
Okay, so when you go into exact, that's very specific. It's usually one ASIN, and you've got an exact match and you've got the bid dialed in. But if people have grouped together, say 20 different SKUs into one campaign, and even if they were exact matching that, is that going to provide the efficiency, or is it still going to be waste in amongst the wrong groupings?
Yeah. There'll still be waste, and the main reason that you'll have waste there, and predominantly what will happen in that situation would be that you'll kill most of your traffic, and that's because you'll have different average order value products in the same campaign, like a $10 product versus a $100 product. The bid that you'd be willing to pay on a $10 product is very different to the one on the $100 product. And let's say in that example that the $10 product's getting most of the traffic. When you're optimizing your bids, you're most likely going to be optimizing the bids on whatever the average order value is. And if it's the $10 product's getting most of the orders, your average order value is going to be low. So then when you calculate your bids, it's going to be that your bids are too low for the $100 product to get any traction.
Right.
And so grouping them together means that you're not necessarily going to get a heap of waste, but you are going to kill your traffic a lot to that scenario.
Okay. Just something I thought of. Obviously, we do audits and we can see that we've got a way to find that wasted spend. If people aren't doing that audit, can they easily spot that inside of their Amazon Ads account, or is that one of the challenges with the data inside of Amazon Ads? You just can't spot that easily.
No, it's not easy to spot because Amazon has so many layers. So it's got you've got product level data, then you've got campaign level data, and then you've got target level data, and then you have search term level data.
Right.
And because of those layers of complexity, it's very hard for you to identify waste. Because, for example, an auto campaign will have you'll see the auto campaign and you'll see a whole bunch of orders and spend and sales, and you'll be like, oh, well, there's no waste there because I've got spend, but I've got sales. But if you actually dove deeper than that, which realistically it's at the search term level.
Yeah.
If you went down to the search term level, you'd actually find there's a whole bunch of search terms in there, like literally thousands, that have been getting clicks without sales. But at the campaign level, you're never going to find that. Even at the target level, you're not going to find that. You'd have to go down to the search term level to find that kind of information.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I always wondered that, actually. So that's good. That's a good answer. What about, we're starting to talk about how to fix it as well by negative matching, and also by putting into exact targeting. What else? Is there anything else there in terms of fixing wasted ad spend?
Yeah, there's probably one other aspect, and that is your placement type. So another layer of complexity is that within campaigns, and I've talked about this in a previous episode, you have what they call placement modifiers, where you can optimize for top of search, which is literally those first ads you see right at the top of search, not the sponsored brand ones, but the first row of that looks kind of like an organic listing. That's what we would call top of search placement. You then got what we call rest of search, which is basically everything that's not that on the search results page. Yeah. And then you have what they call product pages, which is serving ads literally on the product page of a competitor's page. And so that would be the other area. Like a lot of the time, the conversion rate is best at top of search, well, almost always actually. Then rest of search, and then product pages is normally the last one. So sometimes brands spend too much on product pages, and they waste too much of their ad spend on product pages when they really should be just focusing that spend on, for example, top of search.
Right.
So that'd be another area that, and again, very complicated to get at, like, particularly if you've got lots of campaigns, it'd be very hard to sort of look at that.
Okay. So what are some examples of what you've seen in terms of, we do an audit, we see the wasted spend, and then how quickly can you turn that around in terms of saving or reallocating that wasted spend? Like, what kind of time frame do you need?
Yeah, cool. So we've actually got a case study that we've done just recently. We're gonna do an episode on this next week where we'll literally show you the numbers. But this case study was a 45-day. We're 45 days into management for this particular brand. When we did the audit, they were at 42% of all of their spend was going to waste, and after 45 days, we were able to drop that down to 33. So a 20% reduction in total terms. So down from 42% down to 33% in 45 days, and we're continuing to see that trend, downward. And that's 45 days. It's not very long, particularly, with, larger accounts.
Yeah.
It's a fair bit there.
And that case which we'll dive into next week, even though that doesn't sound like a big shift, but when we talk about absolute dollars spent on ads and the like a 40% reduction in ad spend, delivering an even better result. So that this is one of the key upsides of, getting rid of this wasted spend, or as much of it as you can, and continuing to, is you can then reallocate it and just spend it far more efficiently for a better result. So, all right. So any kind of last words? So, I mean, obviously, if you don't know these numbers, you do want to get an audit done so you can see what it actually is, and it can be an eye-opening. And in the context of where you are, if you're more mature on the platform already, or if you're more early days, it's going to have relevance there. So that would, seriously encourage you to do that. And just if you go to gosellglobal.com, look at services and management for Amazon ads, and then book a call with Seb to get that done. And actually on that page you can see an example of what you get if you haven't already done that. But any last words, Seb, on wasted spend and how important is it in the overall scheme of advertising?
Yeah, I think the last thing I'd say is just that got to get really crystal clear on what you're trying to achieve with your advertising. It's very hard to say if something is waste without knowing where you're going. And so, and that's part of what we do as well. Here at Sell Global, we get, most of the part that we do with brands when we onboard them is we spend a good chunk of time getting super aligned on, like, what are we actually trying to achieve with these products? And I think once you know that, it becomes much easier to understand, like, what is waste and what is not waste.
Yeah, so important. Just starts out with what is the objective, and then you can drive towards that. And then everything's in context. So what might look like waste is actually not in terms of the investment. Okay, well, hopefully you found that useful in terms of really understanding around the wasted spend. And as I said earlier, if you'd like to know what it is for your Amazon ads account, then do reach out to us. And make sure you also tune in next week, where we will dive into this case study that I think you'll find fascinating in terms of the results, and it's a real example of what can be achieved in a short period of time with the right objectives and then the right strategy to meet those objectives, and that'll be good. So we'll see you next Tuesday as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks again, Seb.
Thank you.